Okay, well, today is going to be a difficult text, and if it wasn't for Dr. Brian Auker's willingness to sit with me in this text and the many, many commentaries, including Daniel Block's, on this text, I wouldn't be able to teach it because I find it frustrating and enraging and heartbreaking. And so with that, I want to give some warning about it. The text today is Judges 19. Judges is about a fifth of the way through in the text. And if you are opening your Bible, you flip through the first few chapters, you'll get to Joshua, then Judges, and the Samuels. This text has been considered one of a text of terror. It has sexual violence and murder at the end of the passage, and because of that, I want to prepare us a little bit to enter in. So first, to those of you who are here who may have had sexual violence in your story, I want you to know that you're not alone, that today is going to be hard. I've broken up the passage into parts, and I'll give a trigger warning before we enter into that last section of the passage. If you need to leave, know that that's okay. I've left this passage being taught before. And if you need to talk about it afterwards, myself and a few others have set up some time where you can come and chat about it. We'd love to process through this with you. If you would like to seek therapy because that's part of your story, we have resources for you, so please come ask, and we'd love to help you be able to pay for those things. Second, to those who are here who have felt forms of harassment, but maybe not sexual violence, or maybe something that's not rape but still harmful, it's okay to also be hurt by this. It's okay to come in today and not create a litmus test for why you should be okay. It's hard, and please use those same resources. Finally, for those of you who are here and you have no idea what I'm talking about, or you just can't relate, that's actually really good. You shouldn't be able to relate to that. In a good and perfect world, no one would. But if you'd like to come and ask us what it's like to walk with someone through that, chat with us and we'd love to guide you. So let's enter into our text. We're about to step in where the Israelites have become outrageous. The Israelites are a people group who were supposed to have God as their king. They're supposed to worship him. And as God as their king, they would have had law on how to behave and how to worship him and how to love others, so that when other nations came into Israel, they would go, wow, look at this wonderful place with a wonderful king and a God that we could worship too. But instead, Israel's decided not to make them their king. And when we enter in, we're hearing a description of how horrible it is. So our text is asking us this big question of, what does it mean when we don't put God on the throne? What happens when we don't make God our king? You see, Judges starts with the phrase of, everyone did evil in the sight of the Lord. And then the author starts to change that into saying everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And when we step into this chapter, there's no king in Israel. They're doing evil, they're doing what they feel is right, and now they have no authority to tell them good from bad. What happens when we don't make God our king? Opening the first 10 verses of the passage. In those days, when there was no king in Israel, a certain Levite was sojourning in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, who took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. And his concubine was angry with him, and she went away from him to her father's house in Bethlehem at Judah. He was there some 4 months. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back. He had with him his servant and a couple of donkeys. And she brought him into her father's house, and when the girl's father saw him, he came with joy to meet him. And his father-in-law, the girl's father, made him stay and remained with him 3 days. So they ate and drank and spent the night there. And on the 4th day they arose early in the morning, and he prepared to go. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, strengthen your heart with a morsel of bread, and after that you may go. So the two of them sat and ate and drank together. And the girl's father said to the man, be pleased to spend the night, and let your heart be merry. And when the man rose to go, his father-in-law pressed him till he spent the night there again. And on the 5th day, he rose early in the morning to depart. And the girl's father said, strengthen your heart and wait until the day declines. So they ate, both of them. And when the man and his concubine and his servant rose up to depart, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, "Behold, now the day has waned toward evening. Please spend the night. Behold, the day draws to a close. Lodge here and let your heart be merry, and tomorrow you shall arise early in the morning and depart for your journey and go home." But the man would not spend the night. He rose up and departed and arrived opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem. He had with him a couple of saddle donkeys, and his concubine was with him. What happens when we don't make God our king? The first answer the text gives us is that the person and the home is attacked. The person and the home is attacked. Look back through the passage. Who are our characters? You see, before this passage, we have lots of famous characters in the Bible. We have Adam and Eve, we have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, we have Moses, we have Joshua, and in Judges, every chapter is full of important characters, all with names. Even minor characters throughout the story of the Bible, like Shipra and Puah, who saved the Hebrew babies, they have names. Who are our people? They don't have any name. And it's easy to miss that. So why is it important that they don't have names? When my father and mother found out they were pregnant, my dad started writing letters to me, and I have those letters with me. And in the beginning of those first few letters, he just talks about how excited he is, and then in his excitement, he's like, "What are we gonna name you?" And he goes through all these different names and what they mean, and finally I'm born, and he writes to me, "Sophie, because our prayer is that God gives you wisdom and uses you in that capacity for his kingdom. Michelle, because it means who is like God, as in who is like God in all goodness and kindness and faithfulness and power." When they put my name together, he says, "It's our prayer that you would be a godly woman of wisdom." When I look at my father and he says, "Sophie Michelle," I know a few things about myself suddenly. I know that I'm a gift to him because he's given me that name. I know that I have a responsibility to the person calling my name. And when people say my name, I have a responsibility to the person of whom my name calls to. Names have power in them, and they give us a placement and an identity. Daniel Block says it this way: to have a name is to be somebody, to have an identity. And since names are given and used by others, to have a name is to have significance within the community. Our characters have no name. And that's significant because it means two things. One, they represent stereotypes for us. They have no names, which means that when we read of them, we're not just reading about specific people and stories, although they are. We're reading about the way that any one of them could have behaved at the time, the way anyone in Israel could have behaved at the time. And they don't have enough significance in their actions and in their person in our story to show that they're different from someone else. They are just like everyone else in Israel. They are mere stereotypes. But something even worse about not having a name means that there's a devaluing that's happening. We see this as the attack that's happening on the person and on the home. For the home, we see it in the marriage. You see, the Levite has a concubine, and that should really send some alarm bells for us, because the Levite would know that in Genesis, God says marriage is for man and for woman singular. So why does he have a second wife? And sometimes concubines were even less than that. Why does he have this woman? And she gets angry. Some translations might say that she was unfaithful, and the commentaries kind of debate whether or not this is fair, but because the Levite doesn't get angry at her, it's fair to assume that what's happening is a marital fight, and she leaves. She leaves, and she leaves for 4 months. And that's a long time to be in a marital fight, especially when you're not putting any effort into seeing each other. She leaves, and their home life is disaster. The Levite goes to find her. He goes to win her back. He goes to the father's house. And suddenly the devaluing of the woman is really, really clear here, because she opens the door and then disappears. All she becomes is a reference point to us. She doesn't have enough importance in the story for them to give her attention or action. And in Judges, women are full of actions. Women kill kings in the book of Judges. And suddenly this woman, all she does is become a reference for us to know who we're talking about. Her husband and her father. And what do? They eat and drink and are merry morning and night. And friends, there's nothing wrong with enjoying food and wine. There is something wrong with enjoying it morning and night, to the point where you're going to start making unwise decisions. And we see that in the leadership of these two men. They begin making unwise decisions. The father encourages the Levite to stay longer and longer and longer until finally he's had enough. He's like, I gotta go. But he leaves at a dangerous time. His home life is a wreck. The woman is barely present anymore, and that's his whole purpose for being there. We see a disaster happening in front of us. And we see the reality of disaster in our own lives. We see it even as this holiday season is coming up. There's many of us who think about the holidays and we think about the ways that our parents have failed us. We think about the ways that they've hurt us and made unwise decisions that have harmed us. Some people are maybe thinking about how to make it seem like their marriage is good for their kids as they think about Christmas. Maybe some of you aren't going home for the holiday season because you felt like the person in the corner is just a reference point. When God is not our king, our families start to see this attack on them, and they become a disaster, and our personhood is taken from us. But then we start to wonder, is it just us? Is it just our family? Is it just our personal life? Because it seems like it's a lot bigger than that. And that's because it is. And we're part of a community. We're all going to be impacted by this. And that's what the next part of our text talks about. Judges 19:11 through 21. When they were near Jebus, the day was nearly over. And the servant said to his master, "Come now, let us turn aside to the city of Jebusites and spend the night in it." And his master said to him, "We will not turn aside into the city of foreigners who do not belong to the people of Israel, but we will pass on to Gibeah." And he said to his young man, "Come and let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night at Gibeah or Ramah." So they passed on and went on their way. And the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. And they turned aside there to go in and spend the night at Gibeah. And he went in and sat down in the open square of the city, for no one took him into his house to spend the night. And behold, an old man was coming from his work in the field at evening. The man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he was sojourning in Gibeah. The men of the place were Benjaminites. And he lifted his eyes and saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, "Where are you going, and where do you come from?" And he said, "We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote parts of the hill country in Ephraim, from which I come. I went to Bethlehem, Judah, and I am going to the house of the Lord. But no one has taken me into his house. We have straw and feed for our donkeys. There is no lack of anything. We have bread and wine for me and your female servant and the young man of your servants. There is no lack of anything." And the old man said, "Peace be to you. I will care for all your wants. Only do not spend the night in the square." So he brought him into his house and gave the donkeys feed and washed their feet and ate and drank. When we don't make God our king, it's not just our personal lives. It's not just our person who's attacked. Our community is attacked. And in its attack, it becomes unsafe and unwelcoming and dangerous. You see, the Levite and his group have traveled about 6 miles now, but because they left so late in the evening, it's getting dark and dangerous, and they need to find a place to stay for safety. So they come up to the first town, and he says, "We can't stay there. Those are not men of Israel." And the thought there is, if you're with the people of Israel, there's going to be safety, because those are family. We know the expectations of how they should be living. We know the God they're supposed to serve. There's going to be safety there. So they go on to Gibeah, which is a town of the tribe of Benjamin of Israel, but no one welcomes them in. No one gives them that safety that should be expected, because their community is broken. Everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes. They didn't have the expectation or the authority put upon them to then actually fulfill the loving of their neighbor. They did what they wanted because they could. And an old man, an outsider of the town, comes in and he takes ownership of them. And he provides the safety for them. But he has this odd phrase at the very end. He says, "I'm going to take care of you, but do not spend the night in the square. One of my favorite films for Halloween is Coraline. And Coraline finds this land that has all these things that point to it being so good and loving and kind. Parents that just delight in her, food, animals that talk to her, flowers glow, everything seems so wonderful and safe. But through the beginning of the movie, she keeps getting these hints from the other characters. You're not safe, Coraline. Don't go through the door, Coraline. And as a viewer, you listen and your gut starts to wrench. Because as she's assuming their safety, you know there is something terrifying coming her way. She doesn't listen. The statement that the Gibeah old man is saying is that there is something really evil along the way of the city. Do not spend the night in the square. It's almost a command to them. It's a warning. The place you think should be safe, the place that should be a welcoming and wonderful place of your brethren, is not for you. Their community is a disaster, and they have no king to make it right. I think one of the easiest ways we see this in our own communities is the Ring doorbell camera. I think it's kind of funny because you'll go into the most lovely, wonderful neighborhood. We live in a most wonderful, lovely neighborhood. We live in Shaw. And during the day, you hear the birds chirp. You see all these wonderful people walking their dogs. And at night, all the Ring doorbell cameras you can see. Because at night, they know there's something unsafe in the darkness. Even when we think we live in a wonderful community, we know there's something unsafe that's lurking ahead. That's why we have so many true crime podcasts these days. But what's the danger? What is the thing that this old man is warning about? How bad could we really become without a king? This next part is the part that might be triggering, and if you need to leave, that is totally fine. Judges 19, verse 22. As they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, worthless fellows, surrounded the house, beating on the door. They said to the old man, the master of the house, "Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him." And the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said, "No, my brothers, do not do this wicked thing. Since this man has come into my house, do not do the vile thing. Behold, here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me bring them out, violate them, and do what seems good to you. But against this man, do not do this outrageous thing." But the men would not listen. So the man seized his concubine and made her go out to them. And they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. And as morning appeared, the woman came and fell down at the man's house where her master slept, until it was light. And her master rose up in the morning, and when he opened the door of the house and went out to go on his way, behold, there was his concubine, lying at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let us be going." But there was no answer. Then he put her on the donkey, and the man rose and went away to his home. And when he entered his house, he took a knife, and taking hold of his concubine, he divided her limb by limb into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. What happens when we don't make God our king? What happens when the person's devalued? What happens when the home life is a wreck? What happens when our community is unsafe? What happens is that it culminates in our morality and our very lives being attacked. The danger of the town is suddenly realized. They're enjoying their night, and they hear the men come to them. The worthless men who have no character, they come and they beat on the door of this house, and they demand to use the Levite for sexual pleasure, to gang rape him. The old man comes out and tries to protect the man. You see, he feels a responsibility as the host to protect this man. But the problem is, he's not just hosting that Levite, he's protecting and hosting all of them. But there's no king in Israel, and everyone does right in their own eyes. And to him, the Levite is the one of value. So he offers his daughter and the concubine to the crowd. And the man, the Levite, who's on this journey to speak kindly to his wife and bring her home, throws her out like meat for dogs. He did right in his own eyes. There's a musical, Les Mis, most of us know it. And in one of the most powerful moments of the film, a character named Fantine has been thrown out of her work and is on the streets doing sex work. And one of the most famous songs happens right after Fantine has just been bought for sex. And she starts to talk about and sing what her life was supposed to be like, what it was like falling in love with a man she trusted, but then how he left her with child. And she ends the song like this: "My life, I dreamed a dream my life would be so different from this hell I'm living, so different now from what it seemed. Now life has killed the dream I dreamed." Fantine lived in a world where everyone was doing right in their own eyes, where everyone was doing evil in the sight of the Lord. Fantine lived in a world where when the men come knocking, she is the one thrown out. It's in that world that this old man thought what he had to protect was only the Levite. And it's in that world where the Levite throws his own wife out. Everyone did right in their own eyes. The worthless man, the old man, the Levite. Everyone's value was based off of what you decided, and the concubine got judged as least valuable. She didn't matter. She was abused all night, and she falls at the door of what should have been safety ahead. The next morning, the Levite comes out, preparing to leave even without her. He sees her there, her arms reached out, and he says, "Get up, we're going." No compassion, no looking for her to see if she's okay. Get up. And I think one of the most troublesome parts of this story is that it doesn't say that she was dead, it says she didn't answer, which leaves all of us, and commentators even commenting on it, we don't know who killed her. We don't know if it was the men of the city. We don't know if she died on her own, just brokenhearted. We don't know if it was the Levite. But we do know he's the one that cut her up. He's the one that cut her up like an animal as a message to the 12 tribes of Israel. So that when they saw her body, they had to talk about what was going on in their land. How do we face the tragedy ahead of us and in our stories? Dan Allender talks about in his Healing Path the different ways we historically do it. We can avoid it. We can try to act like it's made us stronger and not cry over it. But the reality is pain is hard. It's difficult. And we can't just pretend it doesn't exist. It will impact us. So Allender talks about what it means to deal with pain. It means to talk about it with someone, and it means to process through it, and it means to acknowledge that that is part of your story. We have to acknowledge the pain. When we don't make God our king, when we don't put him on the throne, it's not just that we're getting attacked by someone. When we don't make God our king, Satan attempts to take the throne. And Satan attacks hard. And he attacks all the good things. He attacks the person because you're an image bearer and he hates that. He attacks the home because God has made family to be good. He attacks our communities because God has given us one another to walk in this life. He attacks everything about us, up to the morality that we have, which is the law of God, and God is good, and Satan hates that. He attacks, but he attacks by trying to tempt us into being a part of the destruction. Israel is destroying itself at this point. But God has not abandoned them, and God will not abandon them. Because even during this horrific story, God is using two named women, Ruth and Naomi, to bring about a lineage a lineage that he himself will come into, be born through as a person in the name of Jesus Christ. He will live and suffer here on this earth. He will die on a cross, and he will be resurrected so that when we see the pain of life and we see the destruction and the attack of Satan, we can look to the empty cross and see that Jesus has defeated him. He has defeated him because that is Jesus' throne, whether we want it to be or not sometimes. And he will not give it up to Satan because he loves us. He loves us so much. And when we think about what his promises hold, we can look to Revelation 21, where John sees what our future is. And he says, I heard in a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will be with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And if you are here and you do not have Jesus on that throne, can you hear those words? Can you see the hardship of life and want that to be your future instead? One where all of the pain that you know will one day be passed away and no longer, and there will only be good, loving, wonderful God who is in charge. We need to ask ourselves, finally though, what is the point of this horrible story, and what are we supposed to do with our own stories when we see the horridness? The last verse of the chapter tells us, Judges 19:30, and all who saw it said such a thing has never happened or been seen from the day that the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak. Consider it, friends. Consider the ways that Satan tries to tempt you into destruction. Consider the ways that he tries to destroy you. Consider it and see it. Take counsel. Go to a few friends and talk to them about the things that are in your life. Talk to them about the ways that you are hurting yourself and the others around you. Take counsel and go find 2 or 3 older, wiser people in the church. Ask them to help guide you in this really hard life. And talk about it. Name the ways that Satan attacks, because it gives him less power when we talk about it. And name the way that Jesus will not abandon his throne. Name the way that he has brought you through so many hard things and will not abandon you in them. Name them because Jesus is on the throne and he loves you and will never give that throne up. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. It's hard and it's frustrating. But what's more frustrating is the idea of living in a world without you, Lord, and we never have to do that. Lord, thank you that you are on the throne and that you will be forever. Amen.